Chazor saying the Shabbat Chesed Shlag Rabbi Yehuda says Chullin Daf Kuf Zayin. Zok the Mishnah, there's a chumrah that chaylev has over blood, and there's a chumrah that blood has over chaylev. The chumrah of chaylev is that chaylev of a carbon is subject to meila, and one is chayiv for chaylev of pigul noiser and tameh. These things don't apply to dam. The chumrah of dam is that the isra of dam applies to the blood of a behemoth, chaya, and bird, whether they're kosher or not, whereas chaylev only applies to kosher behemoths. How do we know that even chaylev of kachim kalam are subject to meila? And so Rabbi Yana said the pasuk of kasher yuram yishor zevach hashlamim compares the kohen gadol's chatas to his shlamim. We learn from over there. Just like his chat is a subject of Me'ilah, his shlamim is as well. What's wrong with the drasha of Rebbe which taught that the pasuk of Kol Chelev Lashem comes to include even the Chelev of Kachim Kalma as being subject to Me'ilah? Abaye said both psukim are needed. If we only had the pasuk of Chelev, we would not know that the diaphragm and kidneys are also subject to Me'ilah. If we only had the pasuk of Kasher Yuram, we would think that the fatty tail of a sheep is not subject to Me'ilah. Rav Murray asked Rav Zvid, if the tail is considered to be Chelev, it should be also to eat it. Rav Zvid said the pasuk says Kol Chelev Shor V'Chesa V'Eiz, which teaches that the Isra of Chelev only applies to Chelev that's present in an ox, sheep, and goat. Another teretz, Rashi said the chelev of the tail is referred to as the chelev of the tail, but not chelev by itself. And therefore, it's not subject to the isra of chelev. If it's not referred to as chelev by itself, it should not be subject to me'ilah like chelev. And tomorrow we have to come on to the answer of Rav Zvid. Mishnah said, Masha ein kain b'dam. How do we know that blood of a carbon is not subject to me'ilah? So Ula said the pasuk regarding the carbon blood says lochem. This teaches it's yours. There's no me'ilah. The Yeshiva Rav Shimon taught the pasuk says lechaper. The blood is given for a kapara, not for me'ilah. Rechon said the pasuk says hu, which teaches that the blood has the same status before the kapara as it has after the kapara. No me'ilah. Maybe we should compare the blood after the kapara to the blood before the kapara and say that me'ilah does apply. And Mar said it can't be because we never find something that has already had his mitzvah done that's still subject to me'ilah. Tumas hadeshin is subject to me'ilah even after the mitzvah is done. Mar said Tumas hadeshin and bigdei kahuna are two psukim that teach that the me'ilah applies even after the mitzvah is done. We have shtei psukim bam ke'echad, therefore we can't use this to teach elsewhere. That answer works according to Rabbanan who say that the pasuk by bigdei kahuna teaches that me'ilah applies after the mitzvah is done. However, according to Reb Daisu who uses the pasuk for a different drasha, why can't we learn from Tumas hadeshin that me'ilah applies even after the mitzvah is done? And for the pasuk regarding Eglah Rufa also teaches that me'ilah applies after the mitzvah is done. So we still have shnei ksuma bam ki'echad, and therefore it can't be applied to elsewhere. In fact, there's a shita that says that we could apply something taught by two psukim elsewhere. According to him, why can't we say that me'ilah applies after the mitzvah is done? And if the psukim of Tumas hadeshin and Eglah Rufa have exclusionary words that says samoy ha'arufa, which teach that it is not to be applied elsewhere. In fact, why do we need three psukim to exclude the blood from me'ilah? Mar says one pasuk excludes the blood from the halachas of noiser, one excludes it from the halachas of me'ilah, and one excludes it from the halachas of tumah. Meaning, if a tamei person eats the blood, he would not be chayiv for eating tamei kodshim. A pasuk is not needed to exclude the blood from pigul because pigul only applies to a part of the carbon that becomes mutter through some other process. Let's say the meat becomes mutter through the zrika of the blood. Blood is itself the permitting, is itself the matir, and therefore it's not subject to pigul. Hadnalach perek kol habasar, perek ha'orva roitev, perek teshi'i. The skin, meaning of an animal that was shechted, with the skin together with the flesh that is attached to it is the combined size of a kebeya. So the skin and the gravy, meaning the congealed juices of meat that adhere to the meat and are not eaten independently but are eaten together with the meat. So again, so the skin and the gravy and the spices, again, which are not eaten alone but are eaten along with the meat, and the elol, we'll have to see what that is. The bones that contain less than a kebeya of marrow, but it's a kebeya when it's combined with the bone. You can combine the bone which is a shomer, and also the gidon, which are typically only eaten along with the meat, and the horns, meaning the soft part near the head, which are eaten along with the meat, and the hooves, which protect the meat of the feet and are considered to be a shomer. So all these things, they combine with the meat to give off food tumah, but not tumas nevela. Mishnah continues. Similarly, if a yid shechs an unkosher animal for a guy and the animal is still moving after the shechita, at which point it's not yet mutter for a guy to eat because it still has the status of an Eiver Menachai, it can give off food tumah, but it does not give off tumas nevela until it actually dies or until its head is chopped off. There are more things that can give off food tumah than there are things that give off tumas nevela. As the Mishnah. The Mishnah ends off. Yehuda says if the alal of a nevela that was gathered together, if there's a kazayis in one place, it would have tumas nevela. If one touched it and then entered the mikdash, he would be chayiv. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Zok the Gemara. Our mitzvah teaches something that's taught in the Brisa. The Brisa says there's a halacha of a shomer, meaning that the shomer combines with the food to reach the minimum required size. So there's a halacha of shomer with regard to the more lenient tumah, meaning food tumah, but not with regard to the more stringent tumah, meaning tumas tevela. In fact, how do we know that there's a halacha of shomer for food tumah? And if the Tana Dever Rishmal taught the pasuk, there's al kol zera zerua asher zareya, that teaches that seeds in the state in which people take them out to be planted can become tameh. Since people plant seeds with their shells, it teaches that the shells, which is the shomer, combine with the food for purposes of food tumah. How do we know that there's no halacha of shomer for tumas nevela? And from our Brisa says the pasuk of benivlasa it's nevela teaches that tumas nevela is only given off through touching the meat, not by touching the skin that does not have a kazayis of meat on it. We would think that even if someone touches the skin opposite the area where there's meat, he will also not become tamei. The pasuk therefore says yitma. Rav explains the Brisa to mean as follows: the pasuk of benivlasa teaches that one does not become tamei from touching the skin that does not have a kazayis of meat attached to it, even when the skin together with the meat combines to the size of a kazayis. We would think that even if there was a kazayis of meat attached to the skin, if one touched the skin opposite the meat, he would not become tamei because the skin doesn't even serve as a yad, as a handle for the meat. The pasuk therefore says yitma, which teaches that this person would become tamei.